ABC Listen. Podcasts, radio, news, music and more.
Hey folks, Samantha Hall is coming up in just a moment, but I'm Erin Park, host of the new podcast series Expanse, Nowhere Man. You can binge all 6 episodes now, and we've also just released a special bonus ep.
The heroic side of his story just didn't stand up.
With evidence of fraud, allegations of international espionage, and a mysterious death in Mexico. Who exactly was Garrison Gunslinger Sinclair? Listen to Expanse, Nowhere Man now on the ABC Listen app.
The police officers had gone to execute a search warrant on a normal Wednesday morning in a sleepy alpine village. But the day turned to tragedy, with so-called sovereign citizen Dezi Freeman allegedly killing 2 of the officers and wounding another. Today, Four Corners reporter Mahmood Fazal, who recently spent time with sovereign citizens, on what's unfolded and what we know about the anti-government movement. I'm Sam Hawley on Gadigal land in Sydney. This is ABC News Daily. Mahmood, we're going to have a deeper look in a moment with you at the threat posed by so-called sovereign citizens, because very recently you embedded yourself with some of these people for a Four Corners story. So you got a really good insight into what makes them tick.
Yes, I did. I was lucky enough to spend a few months really tracing and charting what this movement looks like in Australia.
The sovereign citizen movement is not fringe anymore.
It's like a quasi-civil war.
The only tools we have is psychological.
The sheriffs are the guardians of the law.
I can believe...
Okay, so let's come back to that in a moment because it really is quite fascinating. But let's first look at this tragedy that has unfolded.
The Victorian alpine town of Pupunka is in lockdown as police hunt for a gunman who shot and killed 2 officers and injured a 3rd.
My heart goes out to the families who are grieving. This incident is quite horrific, and the whole of the police family will also be grieving at this time.
Policing comes with danger, and every day our police officers meet that danger. And this tragedy is a painful reminder of that bravery.
The suspect for this horrific event, Dezi Freeman, also known as Philby, who is heavily armed, is still at large. We must find him.
2 police officers, one 59-year-old detective Neil Thompson and the other 35-year-old senior constable Vadim DeWart, have been killed. Another police officer has had surgery and he's said to be doing okay, according to the Victorian Police Association's Wayne Gatt, who actually spoke to him.
It was good to hear his voice and, you know, he's clearly devastated by the events, as we all are.
Really, this is just a huge tragedy, isn't it?
Yep, and police say the culprit's still at large and, a significant search is underway.
So what led up to this? We know that police officers, including members of the Sexual Offences and Child Investigation Team, they'd gone to this property at about 10:30 on Wednesday to execute a search warrant. So what were they up to? Just tell me about that.
Yes, well, we know 10 officers travelled to a rural property on Rainer Track with a warrant relating to historical sex offences at about 10:30am on Wednesday.
Yeah.
They were there to serve a man known as Dezi Bird Freeman.
All right, well, Victoria's Police Chief Commissioner Mike Bush, he was asked on ABC Radio whether it was an ambush.
Was it an ambush?
They certainly weren't aware of the risk that this person posed. They were fully equipped. They've done a risk assessment before doing the search warrant, but they certainly weren't, which is quite obvious, expecting this response.
I imagine they were prepared, but I'm not convinced they knew how serious the person they were about to confront was and how deep his resentment of the authority was.
So this is Dezi Bird Freeman. That's not the only name that he goes by. And as you said, he fled into the bush, and police say he was heavily armed. So the problem, I guess, for the Victorian police is it's very dense bushland and he knows the area very well.
Yeah, police say they understand he is an experienced bushman, so he's a person that's familiar with the wilderness and survival, and that's actually not uncommon for people who are involved in these sovereign citizen groups. There's almost like a Venn diagram of people who are also doomsday preppers. They like to be self-sufficient and live off-grid, and so that's not surprising, but it will present a huge challenge for the search party hunting for him. A neighbour has also told the police and confirmed that Dezi was well-versed in the bush and that there's caves surrounding the area that he was familiar with, so it'll be really hard to find him.
All right, well, police say that his family had not been with him. They have now presented to police, according to Senior Constable Paul Hogan.
The suspect's family, his partner and children did attend a police station. I know there was speculation that there could have been a hostage situation and things like that. There is absolutely nothing to suggest that they were in the company of the suspect following those fatal shootings.
Now, as we mentioned, you've done a lot of in-depth reporting on the so-called sovereign citizen movement that Freeman associates himself with. Now, just let's talk a bit about him, because he's got a long history with police, doesn't he? Just tell me about that.
Yes, he was a well-known and respected sovereign citizen figure. He was in those circles, he was on their forums and on their websites and on Facebook. People made references to him as someone who was kind of outspoken. His neighbours described him as a fairly regular kind of country bloke until COVID, when he fell down the rabbit hole and, like many people, began to see the law as something coercive.
He's had a number of run-ins with the legal system as well, often relating to his driver's licence. At one court hearing last year relating to the cancellation of his licence, he called police friggin' Nazis and terrorist thugs. So he has a very deep dislike for the police force.
Yeah, he's been in and out of court for years, mainly on driving charges and offences, some of which were dropped. And that's not uncommon for sovereign citizens to appear regularly in court facing charges for driving offences because, they don't believe they need car registrations or driver's licence. And that's where a lot of the first interactions and aggressive interactions with police really take place. It's at those traffic stops. But in court, he used pseudo-law arguments and even tried to arrest a magistrate in court based on these eccentric interpretations of the law, which have no real basis in actual law.
Yeah.
And he even told a court that even the sight of a cop or a cop car to him was like an Auschwitz survivor seeing a Nazi soldier.
Oh my gosh. Okay, yeah. So sovereign citizens, they believe in, as you say, a pseudo-law. That means a law that actually is not the law, right?
Yes. So the sovereign citizen label really captures a loose collection of people involved in what's come to be known as the freedom movement in Australia. So they reject the legitimacy of the government and the courts and law enforcement. Many of them claim that laws don't apply unless they consent to them. So it's the people that hold the ultimate authority and power. The people are the sovereigns. And so they decide which laws to follow and which laws not to follow, or that there are these secret legal loopholes hidden in old constitutions or maritime law. So pseudo-law really is like a toolkit of legal-sounding arguments that these groups will try to put forward, but they have no basis in law.
Okay, and what do we know about the numbers of people that follow this belief? It did gain prominence during COVID, but what are we looking at the moment?
So the numbers are hard to quantify because it's tricky to classify these somewhat disparate groups. What we have seen is a growth in their online presence and, more importantly, recognise the impact they're having in passing motions at local councils and flooding magistrates' courts with threats and so on, which has become one of the top concerns facing the judiciary today. So it's a very timely concern for the authorities who are tracing this movement.
And people might remember that large convoy that descended outside Parliament House back in 2022. It was dubbed the Convoy to Canberra. Just remind me about that.
So it was the largest protest ever recorded on the steps of Parliament.
Protesters putting police on alert as they descend on Parliament House from across Australia with calls for government to get out of their lives.
There was a group of people who decided to rally to Canberra to protest what they believed was government overreach. They weren't all sovereign citizens, but sovereign citizen groups were present at this protest, and it helped these sovereign groups get their message out. They could present their ideas to people who felt vulnerable or maybe even cornered, and it helped them tell these somewhat disparate groups that it's not just the COVID laws you don't have to follow. If you follow our doctrine, no laws will apply to you. And they'd present them with hundreds of pages of obscure legal-sounding arguments that they can put forward to get them out of things, to, not have to pay your rates, not have to have a car registration, not have to pay your mortgage. So the groups of people that were really united in this protest were a mix of your average citizens, anti-vaxxers, and conservative activists. And there was a thick vein of QAnon-style conspiracy theorists running through the middle.
Wow, okay. And they do believe in the right to bear arms, if you like, don't they?
Yes, so there is this belief that since Port Arthur that Australians have been disarmed, and whenever a population is disarmed, it has the potential to inspire tyranny in the government. And, a lot of these talking points are straight out of the, NRA playbook in the United States.
What was it like when you actually sat down with them, when you were trying to understand their arguments, what they were saying to you?
What struck me was how broad their backgrounds were. Some of them were retirees, some of them were teachers, some of them were just local community members, some of them were football coaches. So it was very hard to characterize them, but the conviction was the thing that struck me the most. How deeply convinced they were that what the government had been telling us was a lie, and that the people need to reassert themselves and take back control by any means necessary. I think that conviction was deeply unsettling to me and helped me understand why this was such a growing concern and why it needed to be taken seriously.
But just to point out, not every one of them is a violent offender, right?
No, they're not all violent. A lot of them don't believe that violence is the way in which they need to reclaim that power. Some of them have created common law courts or appointed themselves as sheriffs, and they think they're restoring justice in a way the official system no longer provides. In practice, these courts and these sheriffs, again, have no legal standings. But within their circles, they can give people a sense of control and authority, especially for those who feel ostracized or powerless in mainstream society. But that's not to say that it doesn't have the capacity to become violent.
Yeah, okay. Well, Mahmood, what is disturbing about this case is that it is eerily similar to what unfolded in Williambilla in Queensland in 2022.
Matthew Arnold and Rachel McCrow were ripped from their families by a crazed trio while responding to a routine job at a Williambilla property in December 2022. Gareth Nathaniel and Stacey Train were psychotic and paranoid religious extremists and thought police...
So the Williambilla shooting had all the same hallmarks. It wasn't a sovereign citizen shooting, but I think that's because it's so hard to characterize what is going on within this movement, because there's different groups with different ideas, with different labels and different identities, but they're all rooted in the same anger, this growing anti-government extremism. They're groups who believe the government and the law have no authority and the people need to take control.
Okay, well, you've sat down, you've talked to them, you've been embedded with these sovereign citizens. So what do you think? Does more need to be done to curb this, to stop it spreading any further? And can something be done?
Well, ASIO's Director General Mike Burgess said that because these groups believe they do not fall under the government's jurisdiction, sovereign citizens can become a threat. I know police are increasingly concerned about being called out to the homes of known sovereign citizens. And in the United States last year, there were 5 separate police shootings in the space of 6 months. So this stuff is escalating. The FBI has prescribed sovereign citizens a domestic terrorist threat. That hasn't happened here. More can be done. There has been a trend to satirize them, to describe them as quote-unquote cookers and not take them seriously. But I think we do need to take them as seriously as we take all other extremist threats. And maybe it's time the Attorney General considers why the US prescribed sovereign citizens a domestic terrorist group and takes the precautions necessary to keep our first responders safe.
Yeah, all right. So, Mahmood, what can we learn from this going forward? The police, the government, society. What's the biggest takeaway from this for all of us, do you think?
I think we need to listen and try to understand what their concerns are and why they have such a deep resentment of our laws and our institutions that hold the society that we're all a part of together. Unless we're open and willing to understand where they're coming from, it's going to be very hard to curb the threats that come with it.
Mahmood Fazal is a reporter for Four Corners. You can watch his full report on sovereign citizens, lawfare, on ABC iView. This episode was produced by Sydney Peed. Audio production by Sam Dunn. Our supervising producer is David Cody. I'm Sam Hawley. Thanks for listening.